This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode, I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello, and welcome to episode 384 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. It's called Travel with All Your Senses. Let me firstly pay my respects to the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, where I'm recording this podcast today. And this land here is definitely a place where you can engage all your senses. For me, especially the sounds and the smells of bushland in Australia are just so perfect. They always make me feel home. If you get to Australia, make sure you don't just spend time in a city, or even within our cities, we have a lot of beautiful bushland to walk around and breathe in and listen to the sounds. It's fabulous. So, as you can tell, we're talking about our senses today, and I think it's pretty common knowledge that we realise a smell or a taste can really take us back to a memory, even from long ago, even from childhood. Now, I didn't know that this is known as the Proust effect. You might know this, but I just learnt that today from Marcel Proust's In Search of Lost Time novel. So now I know. But on top of that, when we're travelling, our senses are often heightened as well because we're in a place that's new to us. So what our senses kind of pay attention to is different and therefore more likely to stay with us. So research even shows that non-visual senses, so smell, sound, touch and taste, are often actually more likely to be powerful triggers for our travel memories and experiences. And yet, in a decade of this podcast, we've never really discussed this, so it's time. I think more than ever, we spend a lot of time looking at or even creating visual memories of our travel. And obviously, thanks to smartphones for making it easy to take pictures and social media for making it easy to share. So this focus on the visual has become even stronger of late. But in this episode, I talk with three guests about the other senses and how they've experienced these on their travels and what they remember. For me, if I'm thinking of the non-visual senses, then a couple of moments spring, immediately to mind. So firstly, the first time I went to Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam back in 2002 was the first time I'd been in Southeast Asia, and the sounds of all the motorbikes and horns when I tried to cross the road, and the smells, a lot of different smells I wasn't familiar with, and I think intensified by the humidity and the heat at the time. It was almost overwhelming, but certainly very memorable, and I can immediately transport myself back there. And since then, no other arrival in Southeast Asia or anywhere, in fact, has ever hit me in quite that way. It was a real assault on the senses and something, very special and different. And then if I think of taste, immediately I think of a memory from decades ago, also, early 2000s, a very special meal I had in Japan at a restaurant dedicated to tofu. I love tofu. And it was special because I was with really good friends that I'd made in Japan, some Japanese friends. It was not long before I left Japan after a couple of years there. And also just because this whole meal was so delicious and I ate tofu in ways I'd never, ever tried. And so many good flavors and everything was amazing. And I have tried for many, many years to find those tastes again. And then last year in Seoul at a Japanese restaurant, I had a tofu salad that actually really took me back to those memories of dining with my friends Yoshimi and Eiji. And it was just very, very special. So that's some of the things that spring to my mind. But now let me introduce you to my guests. So first up, I'm chatting with Tom Sykes. Tom's a travel writer, but he's also a lecturer in creative writing and global journalism at the University of Portsmouth in England. So he has a really interesting perspective.
We live in an increasingly virtual digital world, don't we, where, there's a school of thought that says that, you can travel through virtual reality and they're not bad. I can understand why people get excited about this technology. You can put on one of these helmets and certainly visually it feels very much like you're in the middle of Paris or Rome or Berlin or whatever. But I think, a good reason to travel is that you engage all the senses and that, you can get sight and sound from a VR experience or by looking at YouTube videos or immersing yourself in lots of photos from a particular destination, right? But smells and tastes and the other senses, and then combinations of other senses, like the feeling of things against, like the wind, particular kind of like the wind against your face or the temperature of a certain kind of wind. And I think with taste, it's not just about describing or having a sense of what this food tastes like. It's the sort of temperature of the food and it's the texture in your mouth. And only that can obviously only be experienced when you physically and bodily go somewhere. So I think who knows, maybe the technology will get to a point where Matrix style, people can feel as if they are eating the steak that he has. And then he says, I know this is just a bunch of zeros and ones, but you know what? I'm enjoying it. And my brain is telling me this tastes like a delicious steak. But we're not there yet. So in the meantime, and I think even if we did, there'd have to be, I'd have to believe that it can't be a substitute for being there, really. So that's always what the five senses is meant to me. And I think certainly writing about places, it's the default position of the sort of travel writer is just to describe the sights and the visual surroundings. I mean, I was reading, and I've got a class tomorrow where I'm going to be talking about this. There's one of my favorite writers, Sven Lindqvist, Swedish travel writer, who did this extraordinary kind of blend of, it's not just travel writing, it's sort of history and anthropology and aphorism. And he wrote a brilliant book called Exterminate All the Brutes, which is also kind of about his travels in kind of Saharan Africa, but also related very much to the very dark history of colonialism there, And he is a master of engaging all the senses, and I'm going to go through with my students and say, what's he doing here? What makes this so, what is it about his talking about the wind on his face and the taste of food and the smells of places and the sounds of places? How much better is our impression of that place because he engages those different senses in his descriptions? So I'm really interested in how kind of language then represents that and how that can be this almost telepathic act. Someone's had a travel experience. They use words to represent it. And then the person who reads the words is able to kind of have the same experience or go through the same thoughts as the person who wrote it. And I think that's a kind of magical procedure and is all down to the sort of magic of writing, if you like,
Yeah, when it's good.
When it's good.
Yes, a good writer can almost matrix it then, can't they?
Yeah. Good way of putting it.
Yes, interesting. So on that topic of VR, of virtual reality, I would second, as Tom kind of mentioned, that there is some value to VR travel. A couple of years ago, I did exactly this with a group of teenagers in a couple of workshops. These were disengaged teens who hated school and, to be honest, also didn't like life very much. And seeing how they reacted to putting on these headsets and realizing that they could, at least through sight, really immerse themselves. They could go to the Eiffel Tower and they discovered that around there, they could walk a bit, and then they discovered there's other normal streets and shops and life nearby, and they were just so excited to wander and explore. And I was really surprised by what they were most interested in, and I hope that for some of them it gave them some sparks to travel someday. So yeah, I think VR is also a great way to deal with places that are either difficult to reach or that we would be perhaps causing too much environmental damage to reach, or, for travellers or people who are interested in travel but with a physical disability perhaps that would make it impossible to see certain places. So there's definitely a place for it, but it's not everything for sure. Let's go beyond just the visual senses. Yes, I agree with Tom's point after that being there in real life is the best, but that also really good travel writing makes sure we experience that travel through all senses, and it makes a huge difference. So my next guest today is Hannah Ballint, and I asked Hannah about her experiences of all the senses on her travels.
I loved this question because I think going back to my yoginess, I'm really into that. So working with senses is something that I love to work with when I am in yogi mode, yoga teaching mode, and just for my own personal sanity. Again, something that I learned from my parents. I never knew that I was being brought up in this world, but they still, even to this day, even though they're retired, they run a mindfulness course. They've been doing it for 20 years in the town that they live in the UK. And they keep saying, we're going to stop doing it. We're going to stop doing it. But every year they keep doing it.
And they do it together?
Yeah, they do. I know, isn't that cute? Couple goals.
It really is.
So they kind of brought me up in this way of mindfulness, I guess. It was just like, do you think that they never really said yes or no to me growing up. Of course they did if I was really needed guidance, but it was much more like, do you think that's a good idea? Have a good think about it. And they were definitely into like just nature and a bit hippie, you know. So I guess I took some of that on board and my music background. So sound is really important to me. And I was brought up listening to lots of world music. My dad loves world music, even though he doesn't play any instruments, whereas my mum does. But I was just brought up in this way where I guess senses were quite strong. My dad's from Switzerland, so then you get different senses of tastes and things because Swiss food's different from English food. So I think I was just always probably a bit in tuned to that stuff. And then I remember, Vietnam, like going to Japan, that it's an onslaught of your senses the moment you get off the plane for someone that's grown up in the south of England.
Yep.
It is the sounds of the street vendors, the sounds of the horns of the motorbikes and the cars. It's the humidity straight onto you, you know, the sensation that gives your body that you're suddenly perspiring instantly. And then the smells of Vietnam are so different. All the different fragrances of the food types, durian. If you've ever smelled a durian, you don't want to smell another one. And yeah, just trying to sleep in a place like that was so unusual. But I lived there for 3 years. So what's also so fabulous is how you're able to, over time, normalize these things. So you learn to be like, oh yeah, okay, that's just the background sound of my life, you know? And I was thinking that the other day, how now I live in the US, and the main sound of the US to me, the two sounds that three sounds that I relate to the US are the hawks. There are hawks everywhere, which I think are amazing. And so it's the sound of the hawk, which is so cool. And then the other one is the sound of the sirens here. So I think every country has different sounds for the sirens, right? So the sirens here are really intense, and there's lots of honking with the sirens as well. So like, I think it's the fire engines will often honk as well as sirens. And I don't know if they're actually honking their horn or if it's just part of the sirens. I'm not actually sure, but it's very
quite
loud.
Frenetic, yeah.
And you hear them every day. It's very normal to hear those kind of services outside. And it's not like I live in the city centre. I live right out in the, suburbs. So I hear the sounds of ambulances, fire engines and police all the time in the US. So that's another one that sort of sticks out. And then the third sound of the US is the sound of the train, because they also have like epic long trains that if you get stuck at a train crossing, you're there for 6 minutes until it goes past.
Wow.
It's just going and going and going.
Right.
So the sound of their train horn is very distinct because they'll honk it forever and ever because it's like so long, the train. So that's the other sound that I always think of with the US. I don't really remember the sounds of the sirens in Vietnam, but I do remember, even now I remember some of the sounds of the street vendors because I turned it into English words. So you kind of hear something and you think, oh, that sounds like, and I'm not going to do an impression, but I do remember one very clearly that sounded like it said, "Who killed my dog? I killed my dog."
Oh, dear.
That's how it translated into English to me. And I was just like, that is so random. I did ask someone once, what does it mean? And they were like, they're just selling fruit. So, okay. What kind of fruit? They're just like, oh, this fruit. So no dogs were killed, but on a daily occurrence, every hour to every 30 minutes, dogs were being killed left, right, and centre, apparently, to my English ears.
Oh, bless.
And then I've got sounds for Australia as well. So sounds
I'm curious.
for Australia are obviously the birds. They have
that's
a
my
lot
first.
to say.
Yeah.
So the parakeets and the cockatoos are so chatty. Did you know that parakeets are now in the UK? Not on a vast extent.
Really?
But they have, yes. So I think someone lets them loose.
Whoops.
So now, where my parents are from, there are some
It sounds a bit
parakeets.
like Australia.
So it's very strange. Oh, when I moved to Brisbane, then kookaburras. So I'd never heard a kookaburra until I moved to Brisbane. They are in Melbourne, but much more out in the countryside. Brisbane, they were everywhere.
Right. Yeah, we have them everywhere here. I'll hear them daily.
Yeah, I bet you do. So that sound was so fabulous and like something that I love, absolutely love. And then the other sound, you're going to laugh at this one, is the sound of the crossing. So you know when you press the button to cross the road? So I'm going to do this. That sound is Australian to me.
That is so Australian. Your imitation is very accurate. Well done.
So that's an Australian sound to me, which is really funny because that isn't like that in England or America. And then the smells, I just went back to Oz. The smells are 100% eucalyptus. So it's just eucalyptus everywhere. That is fabulous. I love that.
Those memories are so vivid, aren't they? It's amazing. I remember when I first moved back to Australia, I lived in Japan and Europe. So I'd been away like 5.5 years. And I rented a little unit that was the 3rd floor, quite inner suburban, but it's Perth. There was huge trees nearby. And I remember we'd moved back in summer and I could not sleep in the mornings by about 4 o'clock because the birds started and they were in the trees quite close to where I slept. And what struck me then was that they just can't sing. I'd come from Germany where the birds have these lovely, lovely, gentle, soft voices. And then I came back to the Australian like just these awful noises. And there was one that we called the asthmatic crow because it was like he sounded like he was going to die, but that was just his bird call. And they were just so loud. It was shocking to me the first few weeks that I was back. It was just so hard to adjust to. And now I live opposite a park and I've got lots of trees all around me and the bird life is just rampant around where I live now and I love it. And I'm not shocked by them anymore. But
you're used to it.
I'm very used to it. But they're still not, they're not pretty sounding. So, yeah.
No, not at all. You literally feel like you've just walked into Jurassic Park.
Yes, exactly. Yes. I did have a giggle about Hannah turning Vietnamese phrases into English to recall them. It reminded me immediately of my colleague Matt in Osaka, a lovely guy from Queensland. And in the early days when we were both just starting to try and learn basic Japanese there, he told me how he was remembering the phrase for you're welcome, which is doitashimashite, and he remembered it as don't touch me mustache. And I've never forgotten that 25 years on. I can picture and hear in my head Matt saying that. Now, my final guest today is Ethan Kavanagh. Ethan is a Perth local like me, and among other things, he produces the Perth Tourist podcast. This was made especially for Vision Australia Radio, which is for people with blindness and low vision. So it has a focus on touring places through soundscapes and of descriptions that, go a long way beyond the visual too. Now, I asked Ethan about how he used all his senses on his trip to Ireland. Ethan's mother is Irish and he'd even been to school there for 6 months as a kid. But on this trip, it was 20 years since he had set foot in Ireland.
I really took that mentality of absorbing a bit more than just the sights when we were over there. I can think feel-wise immediately and be taken back to walking through Temple Bar in Dublin or near the Thames in London, and it's cobblestone streets. I'd never walked on cobblestone streets before, and what I didn't realise was that they're essentially just stones sticking out of the ground with very little gaps between them. And you could feel the ridges of each stone, but you could also feel your foot wanting to fall into the cracks because they were so wide. So I remember feeling really locked down trying to walk through those streets. But God, they were so beautiful when you saw them, and they looked quite flat and inviting, but they're just not at all.
No, up close they're a lot more like knobbly. And I mean, I'm the same. Until I moved abroad, I had not encountered cobblestone streets. I'd only seen them in movies, and they look beautiful. And then, trying to walk over them like, oh, this is not what I expected. Yeah, I can feel it too.
Yeah, so that was definitely a feel one, a smell one. It was one that I remember from being a child and going to my cousins' houses and, hanging out with them, and then walking back home at night when it was icy cold and you could smell the fires from people's houses, and going back to Ireland knowing I was going to smell that smell again and then getting it was just really, really satisfying. It's a very different scent to wood being burnt here, which is quite harsh. It feels a bit more, it's got a stronger smell, whereas it's a bit smoother coming out of the fires because it's, I guess, a different wood, or they might be burning sod in Ireland.
Yeah.
But it's also mixed in as well during the day, maybe with like an oil kind of mechanical smell. And I just loved that smell. It was probably one that locals probably wouldn't have a lot of time for, but it really made me feel like I was somewhere else and somewhere that I wanted to be, and was sort of another home for me somewhere else, locked away years and years ago. And the sound one, this is one of my favourite ones that I'm going to get to show off because we did a birds of prey experience in County Clare. The birds of prey experience is fantastic. They're obviously, falcons and things like that, and hawks that fly at very high speeds to, catch prey. And they've found ways to manipulate these birds to, be able to not domesticate them, but keep them
semi-tame.
Yeah, in a way, yeah. Essentially, these birds would, while they were doing their simulated hunts, had bells on their talons. So not only did you see them flying through the air, but they would fly over your head and the bells would ring.
Wow.
But they would do it in a way that obviously they'd whip past your head left and right. But because of the speed, there was a Doppler effect as well. So you would hear the pitch shift as the bird flew past your head as well. And what I'm really hoping is that I've either put the microphone in the right spot or just lap of the gods, I got one of those exact sounds that happened in my ears to translate through the speakers. I'm really hoping that happens.
That sounds amazing. You didn't mention tastes.
Oh, we got so many tastes, but of course the staple for me is I just love a Guinness in Australia. And being able to have a Guinness in Ireland as a 20-year-old, as my own person going there rather than as a 9-year-old boy was just great. We did obviously the Guinness tour as well, and it made it taste even better knowing that you knew what the ingredients were. There weren't all these horror stories that, because everyone says, oh, it's got iron in it, and it's got this in it, and it weighs this and that, and then you go, it's got 4 ingredients. I like those 4 ingredients. I don't feel so guilty about drinking this.
I love this. A multi-sensory tour of Ireland. Wonderful place I must get back to soon because, like Ethan, I have a lot of Irish ancestry and always feel drawn to it. So I loved hearing about that. So thank you so much for listening to episode 384 of the Thoughtful Travel podcast. Huge thanks to my guests. Let me tell you a little bit about them. First up, I chatted with Tom Sykes. You can find out more about Tom's work at tomgsykes.co.uk. And he has a really fabulous book out soon called The Years of Travelling Anxiously. I have been lucky enough to have a sneak preview. And there's more to come on this topic because it's a really interesting book and a really interesting idea. I'm also an anxious traveller anyway, more to come. Leave a link in the show notes to it. And also, if you're curious about the book Tom recommended, that was Sven Lindqvist's Exterminate All the Brutes, I'll leave a link to that as well. I also chatted with Hannah Ballint and more info about Hannah's work at hannahballintcoaching.com. And lastly, I chatted with Ethan Kavanagh of The Perth Tourist. Look that up wherever you get podcasts, although I'll leave links in the show notes as well. And you can find Ethan on Instagram at NoisePilotAU. Don't forget, come along to the Facebook or LinkedIn groups for Thoughtful Travellers and share some of your stories of the other senses you've engaged on your travels. I would love to hear more about them. And also sign up for the Thoughtful Travellers newsletter at Substack, thoughtfultravel.substack.com, so you don't miss anything at all. All of these and more in the show notes. For this episode, the show notes will be at notaballerina.com/384. As always, thank you so much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.